Welcome to Reparenting Radio. I'm Lisa Watson, architect of human transformation. This is a space for leaders, parents, and anyone ready to break old patterns, regulate their nervous system, and show up in their life with clarity and self-trust. If you're ready to change the way you lead, love, and live, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to Reparenting Radio. There is a truth that I've been integrating in real time lately that's been saying something like, just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. And I do know how important it is to get outside your comfort zone. I talk about it all the time. But when you're having that real lived experience, it feels like it's a new thought every single time. And so I'm just going to say it again. Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's wrong. Because we have been trained, deeply trained and conditioned to interpret discomfort as a red flag. You know, it must mean there's some sort of misalignment. It must mean there's something off, or maybe it just means that you made the wrong choice. Often we think that. But what if discomfort is simply sometimes unfamiliar peace? And to explain that, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a time in my life when everything got really quiet. I moved to Mexico, and I didn't move there because it was practical. I didn't move there because it was strategic. And I didn't move there because I was trying to optimize anything. I just moved because something inside me said, go. It was my higher self. And I've always been really good at listening to that voice, that deeper instinct, that higher self guidance, you know, that quiet knowing that doesn't come with like, you know, a PowerPoint presentation or real security. It just says that this is the next experience that we're going to try. And I wanted to be someone who stretched herself. I wanted to be someone who experienced what it was like to live in a foreign country, a third world country at that. And I wanted to be someone who could truly leave her comfort zone, because I was in the throes of talking or walking my talk when I moved to Mexico and doing all the things that I coach my clients to do. And I'm like, I'm jumping in with both feet. Let's do all of them. Let's test them. Let's see what happens. Let's see, you know, what kind of movement we get. I wanted to be someone who didn't just talk about courage, but actually embodied it. And at first, the idea felt very expansive. It felt brave and aligned, and you know, it felt like I was becoming this bigger, better, larger, brighter version of myself. And then things got quiet. They got really quiet because I was living in a really small town, under 6,000 people, mostly expats, transients, people moving in and out. And there weren't lots of events. There weren't constant new places to go, or, you know, there wasn't that professional stimulation everywhere, let's just say that. There wasn't really any comparison. There wasn't a social scoreboard that was running in the background. And after about a year and a half, I had experienced what that, you know, that area, what Mexico had to offer me. And then there was just nothing left to really distract me. There was no chaos. There was no urgency. There were no big external waves. It was just me, just my thoughts, my ambition, my fear, my preferences, my boredom, my triggers, my patterns of behavior that I had to look at really closely. And that's when things became really confronting. And not because moving to Mexico was wrong, but because it was stable. And when there's no chaos to manage, when there's no drama to solve, no intensity, no one to compare yourself to, really, you're left with just one question. What do I actually want? What brings me joy? How do I truly want to live my life? And that question is far more destabilizing than moving countries. What do I actually want? Because when you ask yourself that question honestly, you can't answer it from a place of performance. You can't answer it from proving. And you can't answer it from the ego. You have to answer it from a place of truth. And truth often feels uncomfortable at first. And when I sat with this question long enough, what surfaced was that I don't actually want to build a detached online empire in isolation, which is what I was doing, building an online coaching business. And I realized that I don't want to optimize funnels in solitude. And I didn't want my impact to be primarily through screens. What I decided that I wanted was proximity. I wanted to be closer to my children. I wanted real people, real rooms, real interaction, real eye contact, embodied conversations. And I want truly to be of service in a way that feels relational, not transactional. Because I want to help people remember who they are, not performing their healing for them, not performing their alignment. Because remember, clarity, it doesn't come from fireworks. It comes from discomfort. Because it means letting go of the identities that no longer serve you. Like the brave expat, the hyper-independent digital entrepreneur, the woman who can do anything and prove it, and she can do it anywhere. And letting go of identity can feel like death to the ego and to your nervous system, even when it's growth. And that's what we're going to talk about. When stable feels suspicious. Because what I see over and over again is that when things calm down, when life smooths out, when a relationship becomes steady, when a business has a quiet week, when there isn't a fire to put out, often we panic, maybe in subtle ways, and we assume that something's wrong. We may say this feels boring, or there's just no spark and I feel flat, or something's missing. I was feeling like that for years in Mexico. And what I can offer you is this, that calm can feel boring. When your nervous system is wired for intensity, chaos, drama, quiet feels boring. So let's talk about that, because most of us were imprinted very early in our childhood with activation. Because if love in our early years came with unpredictability, it came with walking on eggshells, emotional volatility, inconsistency, lack of connection, our body associates intensity with connection. If our self-worth came from acts of achievement that were, impressive, or we were needing to perform, we were being the strong one, our body associates pressure with purpose. If attention came when you were funny or sexy or dramatic or exceptionally good at something, your body may associate activation with safety. So when life becomes stable, when someone texts you consistently, when there isn't jealousy and there's no drama or, these high or low emotional spikes, when your team is operating without crisis, when revenue's just flowing without panic and your calendar has space, sometimes our nervous system can't relax. It keeps scanning for drama, scanning for problems, scanning for the chaos, scanning for that next shoe to drop, looking. Our beliefs create our reality. Remember that. Your nervous system doesn't relax. It scans because it's used to spikes. And there's a chemical component to this, which is your hormones. There's adrenaline, there's cortisol, there's dopamine relief cycles. And when you're in chaos, your body physicality spikes. And when the spike resolves, there's a dopamine drop. And that relief feels like closeness. It feels like passion. It feels like chemistry. But what it actually is activation followed by discharge. And that's the template that most of us learned early in life. Calm doesn't feel romantic. It'll feel flat and wrong. And it'll send you searching. And it might stir something in you. You might overcommit. You might manufacture urgency. You might chase someone who's unavailable. You might leave a stable situation because it doesn't feel exciting or energizing anymore. Not because it's wrong, because it's unfamiliar. Mexico removed those spikes for me. And without them, I had to sit with myself. I had to sit with the question of, am I building what I actually want? Or am I building what looks impressive? Am I choosing this because it's mine or because it proves something? That's confronting. Because when you remove the noise, you remove the scoreboard, and we've been domesticated into scoreboard living. I did a whole podcast on the scoreboard a few back that you should go listen to if you haven't heard it yet. But achievement equals worth, visibility equals value, optimization equals alignment, and busyness equals importance. How often do we say to each other, oh, how you been? Oh, I've been great. I've been busy. You've been busy? Oh, that's great. I'm glad you're busy. Like busy is good. Busy means you're important. Things are happening. And when you step off the scoreboard, you don't immediately feel enlightened. You feel a little disoriented, a little, undefined. And that can feel really, really uncomfortable. But it isn't wrong. There's another layer here, too, that I want to speak about. There was a time in my life when being proactive kept connection alive. And I don't mean intellectually proactive. I mean energetically, like sexually, magnetically. Attention to me was currency. And I learned very early that being desirable kept me connected, that being activated kept me seen. So when stability entered my life in a deeper way, particularly in my second marriage, the one I'm in now, and the things that I had been used to prior that held things together, like my sexuality, was not the glue that was necessary to hold this new connection together. And there was this quiet that followed. There was a less charge, there was less intensity, less performing. And that was confronting to me because it was different. When you don't have to perform to stay chosen, you have to face who you are without performance. And who you are without performance can feel really neutral and scary and sort of like I said, waiting for the next shoe to drop. It can feel like something's missing. But neutral can also be safety. And safety can feel boring when you're used to being activated. So if you're in a season where things are calm, before you assume that you need to leave it, before you assume it's misaligned, before you start creating chaos and drama, ask yourself, am I uncomfortable because this is wrong? Or am I uncomfortable because this is new to my nervous system in a good way, in a stabilizing way? Because those are two different questions. Am I uncomfortable because this is wrong, or am I uncomfortable because this is actually stabilizing? Mexico was uncomfortable, believe me, very much so, and also stabilizing and relaxing. It wasn't wrong. It clarified me. It forced me to ask myself, how do I want to spend my time? What is important to me? What feels good to me? I read this book, Ask and It Shall Be Given, Esther Hicks. I read that book when I was in my 20s. And then I revisited it again in my later 40s. And I listened to it on cassette tape in my car over and over and over and over again for like a year. It was towards the end of my first marriage, and I was really struggling to keep things together. And I just kept listening to this book over and over again on my 1-hour drive that I had to work every day. And the thing that it said that really finally stuck out to me was that your joy is your North Star, which I now understand as authenticity is the highest frequency that we can hold. And so when we're really true, when we strip away our belief systems, the ones that were adopted out of conditioning, out of fear, out of comparison, out of belonging, out of the need for connection, when we strip all that lack of authenticity away and we simply follow our joy, that is our North Star. So asking yourself, what do I really want? What really brings me happiness? What really brings me peace? I had to go to Mexico for 4 years and get really quiet and uncomfortable to even hear my authentic voice that was underneath. Because I had to strip away all of the conditioning, all of the conditioned behaviors and belief systems that I thought were mine. And I realized after going through this exercise that the things I thought I wanted, I actually didn't. So when I asked myself, how do I want to spend my time? The answer wasn't maximize status. It was be close to my children, be of service, fulfill my mission, help people remember they are powerful creators of their reality. And I decided I wanted to do it face to face, not through an online community. I guess what I didn't want was just to rack up points on a social media scoreboard. It didn't feel like true connection to me. And I believe that we're here to experience, we're here to create, we're here to play, we're here to evolve. And play does not always look impressive. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks like fewer rooms and deeper conversations. Sometimes it looks like saying no to growth that isn't yours. Sometimes it looks like returning home. And that return can feel like failure to a culture that worships expansion. But what if contraction is wisdom? What if stability is integration? What if boredom is just the absence of performance? I see founders and parents do this all the time. A smooth month can feel suspicious. A calm team feels lazy. And a week without crisis feels like something must be about to collapse. So we create urgency. We add projects. We push harder. We spike the system because intensity feels like control. But control through activation is not sovereignty. It's simply conditioning. Just because you are uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes discomfort is the detox. Sometimes it's your nervous system recalibrating to peace. Sometimes it's the moment you realize you've been chasing intensity, not alignment. So here's what I want you to sit with this week. If stability feels suspicious, if calm feels boring, if quiet feels confronting, before you leave it, ask yourself, if I wasn't measuring my life up against social norms, if I wasn't trying to impress anyone, if I wasn't performing worth, what would I choose? Who would I move closer to? What would I stop chasing? And what would I build differently? And can you trust yourself enough to stay in the discomfort long enough to hear the answer? Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes it means you're finally hearing your own truth. And that truth, it doesn't need to shout. It will wait. Simply listen for it. Thank you all for being with me. I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to Reparenting Radio. If today's conversation supported you, take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who knows they were made for more than the patterns that they inherited. If you're ready for serious inner work and real transformation, personally or professionally, you can explore my leadership pathways at lisa-watson.com. And if you're raising little ones alongside your own healing, you'll find my children's books at awakentheone.org. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and keep reparenting the parts of you that are ready to come home to their authenticity.